Okay, so do you know how expensive idle time is for you and your team? And so 1 or 2 idle hours per technician each week can destroy tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in labor value over the course of a year. And so I want to show you how to calculate exactly that. And so going over here to the data set, what we have is we have, pretty basic, data export. And this is, you can recreate this from something like Service Titan, depending on how your QuickBooks is configured. And if you need help, doing that, just let me know. Just shoot me an email, hey, I can't figure out this formula or something. Happy to help. And I'll give you my email at the end of this video. And if you want this data set, it's in the description, a download link. So what you're going to have is you're going to have, a date that they work, technician name, and then, all the different types of hours, paid hours, PTO, training, meeting, standby, travel, billable, right? And so essentially what you need is you need to figure out how many idle hours there were. And we have it right here. What I'm going to do is when I built this, I did it over here. And so what you want to do, like, I'm not adding more data to this, but if you're doing an export and you want to calculate stuff inside the export, it's usually best to do it on the right side, or I guess on the left. But it's best to not do it like in the middle of the data set. That way, as you copy and paste and add new data, you won't have to separate the columns again. And so yeah, so what we need is we need to get this minus the sum of these and the sum of these as well. Like the sum of this plus the sum of this, take that number and subtract it from here. But if the number's negative, we want it to be zero. Like meaning they worked more, right? So they didn't have idle time. It was a negative number. And so the way you can do that is you can use the max function. So the max is either zero or the paid hours minus the sum of these three, not standby hours, and then also minus the sum of these two. And so you're going to get this number here, but what you'll see is that there are some negatives. There are some negatives in the data set, but you're getting a zero instead. And so use that formula so you don't want negatives. You could also use the absolute value function if you wanted to, but no, actually that's not true. Absolute value just turns a negative to a positive. So you want the max of zero or whatever this is. So if it's negative, zero is greater than a negative number, right? So it's going to take the maximum value. Okay, so do that there. I'm just going to delete this because I already have it here. Okay, so now we want to create this, and we need one more criteria. We need the weekday. And so back into the data, let's do weekday here. And what we can do is we can use the text function because we want to see way over here on the work date, what day of the week was it? And you can see here it's Wednesday, but I want to show you how to recalculate that. So equals text, comma, and then do 4 Ds. And then you get the weekday. If you wanted a 3-letter weekday, you can do 3 Ds. And the text function is very powerful. So like I'm just showing you one use case, but there's a lot. So if you wanted the month, you could get the month that way as well. But there's a lot more you could do with it. So brush up on that function if you're finding yourself working with data exports often. Okay, so here we have the weekday, and now we can start to create that heat map. So the first thing we need is we need a unique list of the technician names, because here on the column we have the technician names. And so fortunately, Excel, I want to say they just released this, but it's been several years. They released some Office 365 functions, and this one's called equals unique. And so go equals unique, go in the data set, click on cell H1, press Control Shift down to highlight the whole range, and then you can press enter. And now you have everybody here. Highlight this and let's remove the formula because we don't want the unique formula there for this example. And so highlight it, press Control C to copy, and then press Control Shift V as in Victor to remove the formula. Now you can see there's no more formula. And here we want the weekdays. So just type in Monday and then you can drag it across until you see Sunday, and then we're good there. Let me just widen this a little bit, and I'm going to center everything. Okay, so what we want here is we want the average idle time for Anthony on Monday. So that's going to be the average if s function. So from here, we need to, the first argument in the average if s function is the average range. So the numerical value. So where are the numbers at, right? In this example, it's going to be, do this again, it's going to be in column AA. So here, and then comma. So the next argument is the criteria range. And so there's two criteria. The first one, technician name. The second one, the day of the week. And so you can do those in either order. It doesn't matter. The thing that's important is once you do the column for tech name, that you go back to the tab and it's in cell B3. And then now we can do the day of the week, which is over here to the right. So column AB, and then comma, and then the day of the week in cell C2. And so now we have the average. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we want to drag this over and drag this down. But what you're going to notice is that there's errors. And the reason why there's errors is because as you drag things, it changes the column. So for example, AA turns to AB, column H turns to I, cell B3 turns to C3, right? And you can see this here. So we need to tell Excel like, hey, we want to be able to drag this over left to right. And as we do that, we don't want the name Anthony to change here. We don't want the names to change, but we want the day of the week to go to Tuesday. And we also don't want the columns and the data tab to change. And so what that's called is absolute and relative referencing. Absolute means it doesn't change. You drag it over, you drag it down, it doesn't change. And that's what we want for the columns. So in the columns, just go into just where the letters are, the column reference, and then press the F4 key everywhere you see that. And then for the column here, the name, we want to put the $ before the letter. And then for the row of the day of the week, we want to put the $ before, in between the C, in between the letter and the number. And if I know what I'm talking about here, but what's going to happen is we're going to get errors for Sunday. And the reason is because these people, these texts didn't work on Sunday. So then what we can do is we can just do an if error function. So like if it's an error, then do something, right? So if it's an error, let's just do blank. And then let's just go back over here and then paste. So now you can see there's blanks, but you could also change it. You could say, if it's an error, give me no data, right? And then it'll give you no data. So you can choose what you want it to say. Okay, so now what we want is we want a tech average, and then we want a weekday average. And it's super easy to do because all you have to do is just take this, copy it, and then paste it. And then to get the tech average, we just have to remove the weekday criteria, right? Because it is going to average everything for, the tech name for Anthony in this example. So all you have to do is just go in this, you see the red, how it's Monday. So we don't want that, but make sure you leave the bracket right to the right of the 2. You see it there. So make sure to leave that, but delete the column AB, which has the weekday in the data set. And then also delete the comma. So delete the comma all the way to the number 2. Right, and now you have the tech average, and you can just double click this down and then press Control-Shift-1. Okay, so now you want the weekday average, which again, it's the same but different, right? So copy this, but now instead of deleting the weekday, we want to delete the tech name and the range of the tech. So you just where it's blue, again, just delete everything, including the comma. You can either delete this comma here or you can delete this comma here. You just need to have one comma somewhere. And then Control-Shift-1, copy, paste. Okay, so now let's do the conditional formatting, right? So we could look like this. So what we can do is if you just want to highlight these, don't highlight Sunday because it wasn't really a work day for a lot of people. And then go to Home, Conditional Formatting, Color Scales. So this is green as a high number, and we don't want the high number to be green. We want the red number, right? Because more idle hours is not a good thing. So do the second one here. And then do the same thing for this, conditional formatting, color scales, red, and then you can do the same thing for this. right? So what this is saying is that, Thursdays you have a lot of idle time, and you do as Monday as well. But, Fridays are better. Again, this is dummy data. I'm not using the actual client data, obviously. And so your numbers will probably be a lot different. Okay, and then we want to have a benchmark here, just so we can create the chart. And let's say your benchmark is, we can just do let's just do 1 hour, and I'll show you how we can update this. So underneath the one, do equals and then the number above it, and then just double click this down. Now you have something that's dynamic, right? Let's do it to 3 decimals. Okay, so now we can create the chart. So we want to create this chart here that has the idle time by technician, and then have that orange line that's a benchmark. So just highlight the tech name, hold down the control key, and then highlight these two, and then go to insert. You could do recommended charts. You're going to see a lot of columns. What you want is what's called a combo chart. And what a combo chart does is it lets you either, one, have 2 axes. So you could have, like, say you have a high value, numerical value, and then you have like a percentage. You would want those on separate axes. Or you could have it to where, okay, one of the values is a line and one of the values is a column. So go to all charts, combo, and you can see it right here. And then you could just select what you want the second, the benchmark to be. But for this, let's do a line. Then we can do this. We can change the name to, say, idle time by technician. Let's scroll down a little bit. Maybe we want to bring this out a little bit. Okay, so the final thing is, maybe we don't want to have that extra 0. We just want to go to 1 decimal. So double click, go to the 3 columns here, go to the number, and then do 1. And then here, click on the orange line, and then click the little paint bucket. And then you can decide how you want it to look. Maybe you want it to be thinner. Maybe you want some dashes, and then finally, one last thing to do is to click on the columns and then click the little crosshair and then do data labels. And so now you can see the data labels. And if you want to click here to remove that decimal, you just do that, change the category to number, change the decimals to 1. Okay, so that's how you calculate this. And I'll show you one more thing. Oh, let me zoom out. So how many idle hours are in the data set, right? This is 1 year of data, so some idle hours, right? And then what is the value? What is the billable time, the billable hourly rate you can bill your tech set? Let's say it's 100. So if you just equals this times this, you're leaving 186,000, right, per year, on the table. Say it's 150 an hour, right? You're leaving more than $250,000. Say you could capture half of that, right? That's 10,000 a month. And so that's the whole purpose of this, is just to see, like, how much money are you sort of leaving on the table? What is the true cost of idle time? And I can't spell idle, apparently. But anyways, like I said before, if you have any questions about this, shoot me your questions at questions@databoards.io. If you need some help with sort of structuring your data into a workable format, like to get something like this, because this could be an export from whatever software you're using. Most of my clients are working with ServiceTitan, but QuickBooks, things like that. Wherever you have this data, or if you're not capturing this data, then it might be, valuable to hire somebody just from the data entry side. But you should have, jobs worked, stuff like that, tech name, all that. And then, you should be able to have paid hours. But anyways, that's all I got for this one. And if you have any questions, again, let me know. If you need some help cleaning up your data, there's a link in the description to set up a time to chat. And if not, then I will see you in future videos.